So, I mean, I'm quite amazed by the turnout, given the fact that it's the holiday week, at least here in Slovakia. So, welcome to the National Bank of Slovakia. My name is Eva Gonçalves. I'm a director of economic education and technical cooperation here, and I am also partially in charge, together with the director of the Institute of Banking Education, and I'm responsible also for the Institute. This is a joint cooperation between the National Bank and the Institute of Banking Education. This is our fourth talk in this series, and we're very happy to have Erik Renander here, the founder of CloudRest Advisors, but with a person with a big CV. So, I mean, he will introduce himself. So I'm sure later on. I'm not going to talk too long, but I mean, we're not fortune tellers, although we would like to be. I'm sure there will be some talk of the future today. I will leave that for Erik. But because we're talking about investment, and there will be some talks about investment advice, or there will be the word advice used in the current presentation, I have to say a brief reminder that the National Bank of Slovakia is not in the business of giving investment advice, so please do not take any investment advice from us from this talk. And there's also the disclaimer that anything that Erik will be presenting is his and his own opinions and views. When it comes to how we run these events, I'll give Erik the floor to give you a presentation. We do use Mentimeter, as you can see, so you can either, there's the code, or you can use the QR code for you to give questions during the presentation, but there will also be room for Q&A, and the regular Q&A that you are used to. We'll be passing on the mic. We're also recording the talk, so if you decide to use the regular Q&A, I mean, you will not be seen because we only have one camera, so you will not appear on the camera, but your voice will be heard. So if you're okay with that, by all means, take part in the regular Q&A. After the presentation and after the Q&A, I will ask you to give us feedback. So you'll have to have the Mentimeter ready for that. In any case, and there's still room for coffee and snacks afterwards. So without further ado, Erik, I'll give you the floor.
All right, welcome to the Investor from 2040. And as Eva said, this is, I often speak to investors and asset management companies, so it's often from the perspective of an investor, but this is not financial advice or investing advice. So today we're going to talk about what digital assets are, why they're important, and how they may evolve, and how they may combine with artificial intelligence. Okay, so there are a lot of words get thrown around. Crypto, blockchains, digital assets. I'm using digital assets. I think it's more, there are quite a different types of digital assets, so that's the term I'm using. I may use crypto inadvertently as well. Let's talk about blockchains. That's the first, that's about a $2 trillion asset class. That's what Bitcoin is, a blockchain, Ethereum is a blockchain. Think of it as a settlement layer in the world of digital assets. Second, you have smart contracts. Now, these are like computer programs that sit on top of blockchains and provide services. When investors look at them, they kind of think of them as the closest thing to a company or crypto equity. That's about $22 billion of market cap. Third, you might have heard about non-fungible tokens. These are like specific certificates or one-off tokens on the blockchain. There's going to be a lot of use cases for NFTs. I think we're going to see businesses and use them in different ways, but the one use case we've seen a lot of so far is to marry them with a JPEG and create digital art. So Cyberpunks, Bored Apes Yacht Club, these are some of the NFT collections you might have heard about. And there's about a $5 billion market cap for these NFTs. The final use case, which is really taken off, is to tokenize US dollars on the blockchain. So these are bank deposits which have now a blockchain token, and they're moved, traded, exchanged, leveraged, borrowed on the blockchain. There's quite an active finance market on the blockchain called decentralized finance, or DeFi. What is one of the key principles of digital assets is they work in a decentralized network. So this is a network where there's nobody controlling who participates or when. It's really just the network. There's rules of the road that are established. This is different than most networks we're used to. So a stock exchange might have thousands of traders and banks and asset managers, but the exchange is in the middle, controlling who accesses the network, how they trade, the software. So you have a central node. That's that one on the left. Visa, MasterCard, those are also centralized networks. You could have millions of people using cards, banks, card issuers, but they're all going through the Visa network. Visa's controlling who's on it, and we all trust that Visa isn't taking a cut of the money, or they are taking a legal cut of the money, but not doing anything bad. So they're often, centralized networks often have a regulated counterparty in the middle that we use to trust, whereas a decentralized, the trust comes from the rules around how it operates, and for DeFi, it's in computer code. So we're all kind of hear about Bitcoin all the time, and we hear about it's digital gold, and everyone's excited about it. But I want to go back to kind of what it really is, which is, or what it started out as, which was the solution to a computer problem. So how do you, and there's a famous Bitcoin white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008, and he's trying to figure out how would you have a payment system if anyone could trade with anyone and there was no one in charge of it, and so you had to make sure that no one could cheat it. So he came up with there were two issues. How do you make sure how do you know the order in which everything happens? If everyone's trading around and everyone owns different computers, how do we know the exact order that you paid me, then I paid Tim, and then Tim paid Dave, and so that there's a chronological sequence of events? They tried playing around with time stamping this, but people had different clocks, and there were ways to spoof it. So what they came to is the blockchain. Actually, what I'm saying is Bitcoin married a lot of ideas that were floating around. And this was one of them, which is a blockchain. Now, and this is where the term hashing comes up. When you may hear this when people talking about hashing in blockchains. For a Bitcoin network, all the transactions, there's a group of transactions about every 10 minutes, they're all grouped together into a block. At the bottom of the block, there's an algorithm which creates a very specific code based on the transactions and the wallets or the addresses used in that block. Now, that code at the bottom is the hash. It gets stitched up from block 64 to the top of block 65. Block 65 is a whole bunch of new transactions. That generates its own hash and goes up to the block of 66. So you can see how it kind of stitches together in a chain. But this is important because if we wanted to, say, go back to block 64 and make it so that we all got paid $1 million, right? Let's just kind of make it so that we all got paid $1 million in 64, and then we're going to spend it in 66. So we're going to make it all look, well, the problem is with this technique is if we go to 64 and we change the contents, the algorithm, the code that gets spit out of that content is now different. So now the bottom of block 64 doesn't match the top of block 65. So we end up having to rewrite the entire chain to create this series of transactions that didn't exist before. Now what happens is, because this is a distributed network and everyone's got a copy of this ledger and this blockchain, our blockchain doesn't match anybody else's. Everyone looks at us and goes, I don't see, my chain doesn't say anything about you guys getting paid $1 million. So there must be something funny going on here. So now we get to the next innovation, which was proof of work. So we're sitting there and we really want to cheat the system, right? So we go, okay, so you guys, there's about 60 of you, and you don't agree with Eva and I, who say that we got it. They don't agree with us. Well, let's go out and let's go buy 100 computers, set them up on the network, and let's do the consensus mechanism again. Now you guys disagree, but we have now 100 computers that say, no, that all makes sense. That is how it is. And that's called a Sybil attack. That's where you overrun the network. You create your own consensus by adding so many computers that they all agree with you. And the way they got around with that, and this gets to the whole thing about Bitcoin mining, was the addition was to propose a block, to propose an addition to the network. You had to do some actual very heavy computational work that was going to require a lot of electricity, time, computing power. Basically, it was going to cost real money. You want to pitch, you want to change the network, it's going to cost you money. And also, there was another aspect of the network. When it looks at which block to accept, it looks at how many miners are doing work on that block and accept it. So the point of the thing is, as the network gets big, it would cost us, for us to hire our 100 computers and have them all do this computation, it would end up costing more than we would get by altering the blocks. Now, there is an exception. In the early days of a network, if a network is small, there aren't many people on it, and you can put a lot of value on it, people willing to trust a lot of value, maybe that idea would work. But this is the importance of what happens with Ethereum and Bitcoin is, as the network gets so big and there's so many different miners on it, it just gets too expensive to spoof, and it actually becomes very secure. So that's kind of the network effect, that the bigger they get, the more secure they get. So, okay, that's cool. There's like, so just to go back, what this creates, in effect, is a very secure, distributed spreadsheet or database in the internet. And Satoshi Nakamoto kind of took that idea to make a digital token, like a digital gold out of it. But there's a lot of things I think we're going to find out over time. What can we do with a database in the cloud that's trusted and no one controls it? Now, I'm saying this is a big deal. It's an MBS megatrend, but let's take it from Mark Andreessen. So Mark Andreessen, he thinks this is the biggest thing since the internet. And he, if you don't know who he is, he was the founder of the Netscape Navigator. So back in the early days of the internet, he created the first browser. It IPO'd. He was kind of famous for it, and then he went on to start a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. And so he's become, his firm's name is A16Z. He's very big in digital assets, but he's like, look, this is the biggest thing since the internet. This is the only time I've ever said this is like the internet. If you go back through all my historical statements, one could imagine, with my experience, I could have said this like 48 times. I've never made the comparison before. I've never said this about any other kind of technology. I've never said it about anything else between the original internet and the emergence of crypto. Because I just wanted people to know, like, I don't take the comparison lightly. He's also, we're going to talk about how crypto merges with AI as well. But I've kind of looked back on this statement. I've kind of listened to other things he said. The reason this is particularly powerful is this is a network. And the internet was a network effect. And this is also a new type of network. Whereas AI is more of a new computer, a new type of processing transactions. Okay, so I wish I had made a lot more money on the internet, right? If we think back to our early days of the internet when it had just arrived, what advice could we be giving to each other? Well, if we go back in time and talk to ourselves in 1999, what would we tell ourselves so that we'd be sitting on a yacht somewhere? I think, and maybe think about that. You know, what did you not see then that you know now? I think one of them is it wasn't just a tech trend. I remember working as an asset management firm, there was an internet guy. He was an analyst in the corner covering the internet, and you know, it was like a tech thing. And I think now we see it wasn't just a tech trend, it was an everything trend. And I'm going to go into some more of these, but another big one was the combination of the internet and mobile. That really took the internet in ways we never expected. The transition to Web 2.0, and I'm going to go into that one. That was I remember kind of big thinkers talking about Web 2.0 and how it was going to be user-generated content. And I have to say, when I first heard that, I didn't totally get what that meant. For investors, it was the biggest, appreciating the growth of the internet was the biggest asset allocation decision you could make. And basically, you know, I would have told myself, look, you need to be allocated to this and don't sell it and stick with it, you know, for the next 20 years. Another just kind of interesting thing was, I remember trying to figure out JDS uniphase, servers. I mean, there were so many things about the early days of the internet that I was trying to understand that I didn't. And I almost go back and I go, one of the big things I should have just understood was, this is a big trend. You don't have to understand every part technically, just at least grasp that this is going to be big. And just own the NASDAQ. I could have done that. This is not advice. This is talking about the tech. And okay, so I want to go back to that. When Mark Andreessen is saying this is a disruptive technology. And the challenge with disruptive technologies is we all say that, oh, wow, it's disruptive. That's so cool. And sounds great. The problem is, the trick is, it operates very differently than the things you're used to. So it's actually very hard to invest in or to predict where it goes because it just, you know, I've heard it said, you know, often with disruptive technologies, your strengths become your weaknesses become your strengths. But let's go to the internet. Remember the early days of the internet? It was sitting on your desk or in your kitchen at home or something, and it was very limited what you could do with it. It was kind of cool when it came out, but you know, you sat and looked at it. And then it was a big deal when BlackBerries came out, and you could start. I was like, really? You can get your email on the phone? Wow, that's so cool. And now to go to that next step where with the iPhone, where it was cameras and social media, paying with your watch, it just blew I mean, if you told someone in the beginning, what's the internet? Oh, it's like you can connect computers to each other and they talk to each other. It's like, okay, you know, that's kind of cool, I guess. But then it was this merger of another technology coming in, and the mobile technology just took it to a new level. And so I think that's something we need to look out for. That was one of the surprises we didn't expect, right? Another one I didn't get, and I tell you, I'm a worse technology investor, I think. I mean, I probably never would have invested in Facebook when you told me about it. And I remember this as an analyst, this pitch. I remember someone from Morgan Stanley telling me about Web 2.0, that this was going to be a big deal. They're like, okay, it's going to be like, you know how you read all this stuff on the internet? Well, with Web 2.0, it's going to be users. You're going to create the content, and you're going to upload it to the internet. And that's going to be the big thing. And I was like, I mean, okay, there were apps at the time to share photos, right? If you wanted to put your pictures on the internet and share them with your family, you could do that. YouTube was around, but the videos were horrible, right? Like editing software, the cameras. I mean, it's like, okay, I get that you can do that, but how is that really going to be a big thing that anyone's going to want to watch YouTube over TV? And I don't even have a TV anymore now. And I just look at YouTube, and social media has become a big thing. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because people refer to digital assets as Web 3.0. And they say this is the internet where you're going to own and actually have control over these digital assets yourself, versus like a Web 2.0 like Facebook and LinkedIn. And so I often hear that term and I go, I mean, okay, is Web 3.0 really going to be that big a deal? But then I have to think back and go, sheesh, I really missed it on Web 2.0, so maybe it is. This is another one. It's very hard to predict the winners with these things. I mean, in the beginning days of the internet, when the first boom, it's when I said it's a disruptive technology. It's very hard to predict. It's hard to predict the winners. And a lot of the guys that IPO'd in '98, they're not around anymore. I mean, Netscape Navigator was a $7 billion company. Then you had Lycos, Excite, IAC, sorry. None of them are around anymore. You know, Yahoo's around, but Amazon's was just starting out. So, you know, it switches. Then in 2006, eBay's the big deal. Like, oh, wow, you know, people could sell things to each other on the internet. And that was a $60 billion company, and that was the biggest thing. Searching the internet was a weird concept. Like, it took a long time to think that would be such a big use case. Anyways, you see how it goes, right? You know, the market caps expand, the leaders change a lot. By 2019, we have our first Web 2.0. You know, we have Facebook. It's a $500 billion company. So just to say, we're still early in the game. It's hard, and when you have these types of technologies, it's hard to predict where they go and who becomes the winner. So with that in mind, we've kind of done a review of mistakes from the past, or I have. So I try to think, okay, let's not do that again. What if I was to give myself advice from the year 2040, what kind of things would I say? This technology is revolutionary. The effects will be bigger than you can imagine. Web 3.0 is going to be a bigger deal than it sounds, and the key concepts are decentralization and composability. In comparison, Web 2.0 is based on closed databases, and we'll talk about that. The superior functionality of digital assets will make them more valuable than physical assets. Maybe all these cool things you can do with a digital asset on a blockchain makes it actually worth more. Blockchain will be to finance what the internet was to retail. So in the internet, some sectors were disrupted a lot more than others. And finance, you know, retail, newspapers, they really had to change their whole business. And I don't know about changing the whole business, but I think the blockchain is very much going to affect finance. We're going to see its effects a lot more in the financial sector. Blockchains will combine with AI to create the economy. The economy will exceed the traditional economy in size and innovation. I created this word, the economy. It's the AI economy. You are free to use it, and you can spread it around. Just make sure you mention that I invented it. So I'm going to go through some big ideas. The first one is there are about 30 million Bitcoin private addresses. And you can see how it's grown over the last decade from, you know, less than 1 to 30 million. And by the way, it's very hard to actually pin this number down because we don't really know who these addresses are, but people have done this work. It's between 25 and 30. Now, if you look at the chart on the right is a typical technology adoption curve, whether it's mobile phones, TVs, radio. But what happens is there's kind of a slow move until you get to about 10% of, you know, between 5 and 10% of the population. Then it really goes vertical until you get to about 70%. And then it kind of, you know, there's people like my dad or my parents that take forever. And so it kind of flattens out. Some people hang on for a long time. But the point is, using your imagination, if this is going to be a global technology, blockchains, and I'm using Bitcoin as representative as, you know, ownership of it or participation. At 30 million, we're less than 0.5% of the world population actually interacting with this technology. And I'm not counting ETFs. This is people using the actual blockchain with digital wallets. So we could be, it seems like we're hearing so much about these things, Bitcoin and digital assets. It could get even nuttier, is my point. We could be adding 50, 100 million users a year. Big idea number 2, wallet connection and bring your own data. Okay, so I talked about Web 2.0 really is a system of closed databases. If your bank is like this, your bank is a database of who owns, who's got how much euros in each account, a bunch of names and balances. LinkedIn is a lot of profiles and social data. Facebook's the same thing. Google, they also have data about you, you know, but they're not sharing it. And most of these business models, the moat, the value comes from their ability to collect data. It's why we have these GDPR policies. And what's different about digital assets is it flips the whole thing on its head. The database is actually open and everywhere for everyone. The database is everywhere. What everybody owns, you can see what they're doing with it. You just kind of don't know who it is. You'll see a code, a 24-digit code, and then some assets. So the database is there, but because of cryptography and the code, you don't know who it is. So almost like the database is open. But what happens is when you go to these smart contracts and you want to trade, you want to swap something, you want to buy a cyberpunk JPEG, when you bring your digital wallet, which is just a piece of software, and you share with it your account, your code. So it now can look at all these crazy numbers, and you're like, that's mine. You go, oh, I see what you have now. And it basically shows when you interact with the smart contract, when you first bring your digital wallet, it's like you're giving your account number to them. And you're saying, here's my account number. And he says, oh, I see what you have. What do you want to do? Oh, I want to swap this for that. I want to borrow this. And he says, okay. Authorize the transaction. So now to authorize it, you bring in your private code, which your wallet has. And then you do the transaction. But as you bop around, and I have to say, I could describe this, but really it's kind of something worth trying with a digital wallet. And it's very different than just having an account at Coinbase or a broker and buying digital assets with a broker. Actually interacting with the blockchain is very different. And I remember the first time someone showed this to me, and we went to like 4 or 5 different sites and scanned the QR code, boom. I was like, I didn't have to open an account. Usually every time you go somewhere and you do anything with the internet, what's the first thing that happens? Oh, create a username, create a password. Okay, now I have an account with you, and you're probably going to spam me with some email later on. It was none of that. I wasn't actually owning accounts. I was just interacting with the blockchain. It's a very different business model. It acts very differently, and I don't think we've begun to see how this could change how businesses work. Okay, big idea number 3. Digital assets are not just an asset class, potentially an everything asset class. Now, I want to go back to 98, 99, and let's talk about media. And back then, there were TV, there was radio, there was print, and then there was the internet. There were internet sites. And I remember I used to read, Jim Cramer had an internet site about the market, and he was one of the early ones. And if you ask someone about, going now, 2020, it was a side thing. Go to 2020, 2025, and ask someone in media, like, what do you think about internet media? And they'll go, like, what do you mean? Like, what do you think about media on the internet? And they'll go, well, what do you mean, like podcasts or blogs or streaming or what websites? The whole thing became internet media, right? So I kind of wonder about digital assets. I go, okay, so we're sitting here and we're going, should you own a digital asset in your portfolio? Or investors would ponder this, right? Oh, I have equities, I have fixed income, I have real estate, and maybe I should have an allocation to digital assets. I wonder if we're going to sit there in 2040 and we're going to go, so whatever happened to that digital asset thing? Was that a big deal? Like, were they right? Did you? And they go, what do you mean? Like tokens on the blockchain. Was that a thing? Well, it's everything. Like, I have real estate on the blockchain. I have NFTs. I have debt. I have layer 1 blockchains, governance. The whole thing is on the blockchain. What are you talking about? And I think that's a possibility. It's, I think we may look back in time and go, trading on exchanges, trading OTC, a lot of these things might seem a bit antiquated in the future. Big idea number 4, right? So I'm trying to imagine okay, mobile merged with the internet. What are those technologies that are going to come in from the side and super boost this or interact with this? Digital assets work really well when they're really just based in the internet. When they interact with the real world, it can get caught up into real world legal issues, but they work really well when it's fully just code based. One thing is I think we're going to see eventually someone's going to figure out how to make these VR goggles cheap enough and not make us nauseous, and we will start to do more in the metaverse. And there's already a use case you're seeing. This is the Adidas fashion show, where you can go in there and you can buy. So people in the metaverse, they have avatars, and they want their avatar to look cool, so they buy a jacket for it, or some shoes, or they have an office in the metaverse, and they want a special painting on the metaverse, so they go and they buy a JPEG. The cool thing about digital assets are, you can move them around anywhere in the metaverse. They're on the blockchain. This is, another kind of analogy is in video games. If you're really into a video game and you progress further, and you get some special sort of Zelda or, some potion or something, and it took you years or I don't know how much time, you cannot transition that asset out of the game and you cannot sell it to another person. This is what you can do with blockchain-based video games. The assets are yours. You can take them out of the game. You can sell them to someone for real money. So anyways, this is, I think, with gaming and the metaverse, that will be another place we're going to use digital assets. Big idea number 5, tokenized US dollars and treasuries. This has turned into a big thing. So people wanted, basically they wanted to buy and sell things or use the blockchain, but they didn't want some crazy token with a crazy name bouncing up and down 20% every day. So I'd say the main brand in this space is Tether. These are, and tethered to the US dollar is the idea. These are bank deposits tokenized on a blockchain. It's become quite a big use case. They're about 150 billion of the tokenized dollars, and then now, but they didn't pay interest. They were cool, and you could use them as like $1, but it didn't pay interest. And now they're coming out with U.S. Treasuries. It's up to about, I think, 3 or 4 billion of tokenized U.S. Treasuries. So that's become a big use case. And the number of transactions is in the trillions. I mean, this is just how much is available, is staked. Okay, so I said, maybe the digital assets are going to merge with the metaverse, and maybe that's the two technologies. What I'm wondering is, maybe it's a lot of things. Maybe right now we have so many different disruptive technologies coming with AI, robotics, Internet of Things, cloud, blockchains. Maybe, we're going to be surprised how a lot of these things come together. And the last one is the agentic economy, the AI economy. And I have this view, I guess maybe I have a big imagination, but I think as AI gets more intelligent, becomes more autonomous, we're going to see, and we're already seeing this with the concept of, we went from one AI, oh my God, let's, kind of like a God AI, ChatGPT. It's, we're going to ask ChatGPT everything. We're kind of figuring out that AI can be trained and be very specific at certain tasks or know how to work with certain types of data very well. And more likely, we're going to have lots of AIs working together on problems. So AI agents. But if we take this further and we go, okay, if there's going to be a lot of agents, how are they going to interact with each other? How are they going to pay and reimburse each other? Now imagine a very complicated weather. We want to trade natural gas or something, and we want to try and predict the weather a month out, which is impossible, right? But we're going to put some AIs on it. And we're going to say, okay, AI, NBS AI, or whoever, some AI, figure this out. And the AI is probably going to go, okay, this is going to take a tremendous amount of compute, more compute than I can handle. I need to bring in 5 more AIs on compute. I need some data. I need really specific data going back 100 years, or I don't know. It maybe needs to buy some data. It may go halfway through this computation and need some extra storage, so it brings in AI on storage. My point is, on these types of calculations, a lot of AIs will work together, and when they reimburse each other, when they interact with each other, I don't think they're going to be using Visa and MasterCard. I think they're going to be using blockchain settlement systems. It could be stable coins. It could be some token that comes out that we haven't even invented yet. So this is where I think we're going. Okay, and I even suppose it to say, possibly this economy will be bigger than the real world economy. And I kind of go back to the internet, and I imagine talking to someone and going, you know, there's going to be like, you know how you can kind of buy things, like go back to 1999, you go, oh, you tell somebody, you can buy things on the internet, and I think that's going to be a bigger thing than buying in the real world, at real stores. And there's going to be a $2 trillion internet store. And they'll go, like, I just don't see that. I don't see why would anyone, people have to try things on. There's no way that no one would buy shoes on the internet, everything you heard, right? It ends up being bigger. I'm not sure that the internet retail is bigger than online, but you get the point. I wonder if another reason I bring this up, I'll talk to people about digital assets, and they'll go, that's super interesting, and I get it, the technology seems cool, but the talk is over, and I go and I buy a beer and I use my card, and I don't really use it in my real life. So I don't see the need for it. Then I'll go, well, in certain emerging markets like in Africa where the banking system, the financial system is broken down, they actually do use cryptocurrencies to pay for imported goods. I mean, it's become a banking system in certain countries. And they go, that's cool, that's Africa, but here, everywhere, in most of the developed world, the financial system works quite well. So maybe I don't see the big use case. And that's where I go, maybe the real killer use case is actually going to be the AI economy, like purely digital native AIs interacting with each other. And that's kind of my imagination, but then I come across this. I come across Luna. So Luna, she is an AI influencer who sings. She's got songs, and she sings on YouTube Music and has a song on Spotify. And she's actually making money. And you can buy her token on a digital marketplace called Virtuous Protocol, and she's got a value of $48 million. And I was like, wow, so this is starting to happen. You're having AIs actually, and this is a very limited use case, right? So that it's purely digital. They create content, and they're actually getting paid real money by Twitter, by YouTube, and that money is coming back to do a share buyback of the token. But I'm going, where could this go next? Are we going to have, AI taxi drivers? We're going to have, we're pretty much on the verge of autonomous driving. Is someone going to come up with, basically launch a token around a driver, and you can invest in the driver? Maybe they do a capital raise for their car, and they pay you back from their earnings. I think this is where quite an interesting combination of blockchains and AI could come together in the future and be an even bigger deal than we expect. So that's my stab at where I think this could go and why I think this is a big deal and the technology behind it. And there's a lot more than just digital gold, and trying to use our imagination and get some advice from our future self. Thank you.